Chapter 8. The Sisterhood of Clonard. It had been 2 years since the interestingly named Roman Catholic Bishop of Down and Connor, the Most Reverend Dr. Henry. That's right, Henry. The name is Henry. The thing that I don't understand is that there has to have been a christening ceremony for this. And what did they say to the priest? Listen, Father, tell you what it is. We love our surname so much that we thought double the pleasure, double the fun. We'll call him Henry. And the priest didn't think to say, there are literally hundreds, thousands of saints' names that I could give you that are not the same as your surname. Take a pick. No? Okay, I baptize thee Henry. So Henry goes on to become Bishop of Down and Connor and gives permission for the Redemptorist order to open a branch in the western neighbourhoods of Belfast. The monks, properly known as the Order of the Most Holy Redeemer, bought Clonard House, the former home of a local mill owner, and they converted its reception room into a chapel where local people could come to hear Mass. The rest of the house became a base and home for the Redemptorists. The Redemptorists' arrival in West Belfast could not have come a moment too soon for Bishop Henry. The Catholic population in the west of the city was booming, to the extent that the diocese was struggling to provide the number of masses, baptisms, confessions, first communions, last rites and funerals now needed by the people of West Belfast. Moreover, Bishop Henry was distracted in his feud with the Home Rule Irish Parliamentary Party when its former leader, Charles Stewart Parnell, had earned the ire of the local Catholic hierarchy for his adultery, his Protestantism, and then for his divorce. And relations between the IPP and the bishop had not improved even after Parnell's death in 1891. With the diocese struggling in the face of the sheer number of people it needed to administer to, and Bishop Henry often focusing his attention on increasing his influence over nationalist politics, the Redemptorist monks were a great help and a popular one. Clonard House officially had room for 740 people to hear Mass, 800 at a push, but it was regularly packed with 1,400 congregants. One of the regular congregants at Clonard House was Bridget Quinn, who worked as a maid over on Malone Avenue. She was at Mass at Clonard House on the 20th of June 1897 for a spiritually significant occasion. The blossoming community at Clonard were going to inaugurate a new altar, this one dedicated to veneration of the Blessed Virgin Mary in her guise as Our Lady of Perpetual Help, also known as Our Lady of Perpetual Succour. It was a momentous moment for the observant Catholic community in West Belfast, because Clonard's success had attracted the approving attention of His Holiness Pope Pius IX, who had granted permission for a special icon of Our Lady of Perpetual Help to be brought from Rome to Belfast to mark the first Mass at the new altar. Word of the icon's arrival had spread through the parish and been discussed for weeks, leading to a surge in Clonard's already above capacity congregation. However, by the morning of the Mass, the Redemptorists were in a panic. The icon of Our Lady had left Rome on time after a special ceremony of blessing of the Church of San Alfonso. But there had been delays as it crossed Europe, and it was not going to make it to Belfast in time for the service. A celebrated Redemptorist preacher, Father Francis Hall, had come over to Belfast from England to preach that day's homily. Clonard House was going to be filled so above and beyond capacity that people were expected to spill out into the streets to see it, but the icon was not there. Fortunately, 2 wealthy Catholic ladies, the Kelly sisters, were in Belfast for the ceremony. The Kelly sisters were keen and generous benefactors of the Redemptorist order, as indicated by the fact that the Kellys had travelled just over 200 miles, specially to Belfast, from their home in Limerick. They had also pledged to finance most of the cost for constructing Clonard's new high altar. On the chance that the icon would not make it from Rome in time, the Kelly ladies had sensibly and sensitively brought with them another holy icon of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, one which had also been blessed in Rome. So the service went ahead on the 20th of June, the feast of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, at which Father Hall announced to the parishioners that Clonard would become the central point for a new Catholic social organisation, which, like the en route icon, was linked to the Church of San Alfonso in Rome. 6 years earlier, with the blessing of Pope Pius IX and of the Vicar General of Rome, Cardinal Constantino Patrizzi, San Alfonso had been the foundational spot for the Confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help and St. Alphonsus. A confraternity, a voluntary association of Catholic lay people, i.e. people who weren't members of the clergy, would meet together for religious and social organisations, and they promoted brotherhood and acts of charity within the community. It would now be based out of Clonard, tied to the mother confraternity in Rome. Bishop Henry signed the requisite paperwork 1 month later. On the first day of the men's chapter of the Confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help and St. Alphonsus, 60 local Catholic men signed up as members. About the same number of boys joined the next day when the boys' confraternity opened in Belfast. But it was to the women of West Belfast that the Confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help and St. Alphonsus made its biggest impact. For when the books for the women's chapter opened at Clonard on the 5th of September 1897, 467 local women queued to sign up. The very first in line was Mary Hodgson, another Limerick native, though a far less affluent one than the Kelly sisters. Mary was particularly emotional that day. Mary Hodgson, I should say, was particularly emotional that day. 20 years earlier, she'd moved to Belfast from Limerick for work. She lived about a 5-minute walk from Clonard at Springfield Terrace. And having grown up with a Redemptorist church nearby her in her home city of Limerick, she'd spent 20 years praying that the order would open a church in Belfast. Bridget Quinn, with a day off from her work in Malone, was also there to sign up. Like Mary Hodgson, Bridget had migrated to Belfast for economic reasons, in her case from the southern town of Dundalk. In the queue to sign up to the confraternity, Bridget could spot some of her Belfast neighbours. Every single woman in the Flanagan family who lived on Lower Clonard Street was there, as were all the ladies in the Hayes family who lived over on Odessa Street. They could also hear unusual accents. A whole group of colleagues who were domestic workers in the Ulster Hotel up in Derry had travelled hours on the train to sign up together. There was a Catholic lady down from Ballycastle, a long enough train journey then from the north coast, and one lady from the then almost exclusively Protestant seaside town of Bangor. The Confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help and St. Alphonsus became a focal point for these women to express both their faith and a sense of community, of sisterhood. Many of the members of the confraternity worked in the Belfast linen mills, which the diocese then tactfully worked around by making sure to timetable confraternity events on days when the mills were closed. The women started work in the mills at 6 a.m. and broke for their breakfast at 8. They asked could Mass be moved in the mornings from its scheduled time of 8 to 8:05 so that they could make it. Many of the women would stay with the confraternity for decades. There is a photograph from 1957 of 19 of the original signees attending the confraternity's Diamond Jubilee celebrations at Clonard. The parades for the Silver Jubilee in the 1920s and the Diamond in the 1950s were huge, as were attendance numbers for the outdoor masses on both occasions. On the first Easter since the confraternity arrived in Belfast, the Easter of 1898, the diocese and the Redemptorists offered something unusual, or perhaps better to describe it as atypical to the way Catholic confraternities at the time generally functioned. The parish announced that they were organising an Easter retreat when the mills were closed for Easter weekend, but that this retreat was only for female members of the confraternity. The West Belfast chapter's decision to create more and more gender-specific retreats for the women's chapter puzzled the Redemptorist priest and historian Father Peter Burns when he wrote his history, The Clonard Women, in 2019. To quote Father Burns in that book, "There is nothing else in the chronicle to explain why an inclusive pious association was rather suddenly restricted to women, and given the same outward form as the men's confraternity, with regular meetings organised in sections and with its own spiritual director. Why did the Redemptorists suddenly decide that the women of Clonard deserved or were in need of this?" Burns suggests that this likely was part of the Catholic Church's attempts to tackle an epidemic of alcoholism in West Belfast. Indeed, from the clergy's perspective, the problem was facing the whole city. A Protestant pastor in the East described late Victorian Belfast as a city that is soaked in liquor. Both Catholic and Protestant clergy noted with alarm that Belfast in 1897 had one pub for every 328 residents, and that this ratio was far higher in its working class neighbourhoods. As illustrated earlier in the story we heard about the tragedy of Jane Murray on Eliza Street, alcoholism as ever was intimately tied to domestic abuse and violence. Father Burns suggests in The Clonard Women that this sudden organisational pivot by the Confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in St Alphonsus was to offer help to its female members to deal either with their own potential alcohol problems, if they had any, but also to escape into safe female-only spaces if alcohol dependency in their husbands or fathers left them feeling unsafe at home. There had already been several Catholic and Protestant organisations founded to tackle the societal impact of alcoholism in Victorian Ireland. The Jesuit order had founded the pioneer Total Abstinence Order of the Sacred Heart in 1857, and in 1898 the Confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help liaised again with a Catholic order based in Rome. They introduced the Saturday League to Belfast, which encouraged general avoidance of alcohol, but specifically incorporated a vow for its members not to take any alcohol between lunch on Saturday and lunch on Sunday, with Saturday evenings and nights being proven as the most dangerous time for the temptation to drink. The Saturday League, like the Confraternity itself, had its headquarters in Rome, in this case at the Redemptorist Church of Santa Maria in Monterone. The women in the Confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help formed a special bond that included looking out for all their neighbours, especially if any of them were struggling with bills. A discreetly dropped-off meal could help, and there were women known to help with emergency childbirths or with laying out the dead for the Irish custom of a wake. They formed sub-organisations of their own, like the Pious Union of the Most Holy Redeemer, whose members organised funds to help neighbours in need and to contribute towards the hoped-for one-day rebuilding of Clonard House into a monastery and church big enough to adequately service the Catholic community of West Belfast. These organisations were not without their critics. Some people were thoroughly unimpressed by the fact that the Ladies' Pious Union of the Most Holy Redeemer was fundraising, with weekly donations of either 6p or 3p from its members. These critics did not criticise the women themselves, but the fact that this fundraising was necessary in the first place. In a community that was largely working class, why on earth were its people being made to fundraise for a new church building for an organisation like the Roman Catholic Church, which, as skeptics claimed, was astronomically wealthy? As the joke went, it would be like Queen Victoria walking around, crown in hand, asking for donations from her servants to contribute to their accommodation. The Catholic journalist and future Nationalist Party Member of Parliament for West Belfast, Joseph Devlin, was critical of the way the church operated at times, and in particular he felt that Bishop Henry was quite content to let the people of the diocese look after themselves, while he remained distracted by capitalising his influence in nationalist political organisations, newspapers and social clubs. The Confraternity of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, or Perpetual Succour, was to become an integral and beloved organisation in West Belfast for the next century. Generations passed through it, where they formed friendships in faith. It offered refuge, camaraderie, and it mattered very much to its members. Ashley Montgomery reads the testimony of the daughter of a former member.
Mum was still going just before her 80th birthday. Indeed, it was the prayers and faith in Our Blessed Lady and all her wonderful friends at Clonard that kept her going. I was always being told that when I was born in 1957, she had a lovely year at Clonard, as it was their Diamond Jubilee. It meant so much to Mum. She used to think I was so lucky to be born in that year, to have such blessings from Our Lady. It meant a lot to her. When she went to Mass, she sat in the same seat beside the same friends and ladies, all gathered to gain strength from prayer and our Heavenly Mother's help and support. They had confidence in each other and in Our Lady.
The Confraternity passed through many years, coming a long way from the day in 1897 when Mary Hodges and Bridget Quinn had queued to sign their names in its first register near the special icon of the Holy Virgin, blessed in Rome.